top of the hour, so I am going to get started. For those of you that may have come in late, don't know me, I am Marilee Madera. I am the Director of Distance Education here at West Liberty University. And so the department that I run is the Office of E-Learning. And this is actually, I figured it out this morning. I've started my 26th year working in higher education. My first job way back when I graduated, right after I graduated with my MBA, was I ran a grant-funded program for Duquesne University. And that was actually where I created my first course. It was a 40-hour training program for people who were recently unemployed and trying to start businesses. So it covered business startup and marketing strategies and some bookkeeping and all sorts of different things. So it's interesting when you have a chance to kind of go back and reflect upon what you've done. But over the years, most of my career actually has been spent in workforce and community education, but I've had the opportunity to run summer school for a private liberal arts college. I've done camps and conferences, planned external events for the institution, worked with associate degree programs, planned stackable certificates and micro-credentials and all sorts of different things. So it was a pleasure to add this role to my resume when I got to come here to West Liberty. So I'm going to give a disclaimer on this presentation. I feel like it's been a moving target. I actually wrote it over the past 2 days because every time I would start, knowing I was going to have to do this for the past couple months, something new would happen and be like, oh Lord, how am I going to put that in the presentation? So I decided I was going to wait until the last minute to try to give you the most up-to-date information as I could. And my pattern of behavior is when I get up in the morning, one of the first things I do is I start looking at the news on my phone just to see if something in the world went kablooey overnight. And wasn't there more information that I didn't know about AI from last evening when I actually put this to bed at about 9:45 to this morning. So there you go. So for me, I always like to start the history of a particular issue and to kind of get the basics. So we're going to actually look back for a minute and kind of develop a basic understanding of actually what artificial intelligence is in order for us to talk about where it is today and where it's going into the future. So when you hear the word artificial intelligence, exactly what does it mean? And there is not, as with many things, one standard definition for artificial intelligence. The one that I found that I kind of like best was actually from Oracle. And basically it's applications that perform complex tasks that once required human input. So basically computer programs and systems that can think and do things like a human would. Now, the term artificial intelligence in common vernacular is actually often used interchangeably with several of its subfields, including machine learning and deep learning. And we'll talk a little bit about those later in the presentation. But machine learning is actually what has fueled the tools like ChatGPT, which is what's gotten most of us here today. So here, this presentation is based on what they call machine learning. Now, with machine learning, all machine learning is artificial intelligence, but not all artificial intelligence, is machine learning. So we'll talk about the different types of artificial intelligence in a minute. So a timeline. You probably might be surprised to know that the first conceptions of artificial intelligence was actually back in the 1930s by a mathematician by the name of Alan Turing. And he hypothesized that computing machines could execute cognitive processes and that they could actually do things like humans. So you go through the next 15 years or so, another group of researchers started talking about artificial neurons, which are actually needed for artificial intelligence. But at this time, computers could not remember things. You could give them a set of commands and they would execute on those commands, but they had no memory. So around 1950, Alan Turing, and this was really where the field of artificial intelligence was born, published a paper. And in that particular paper, he talked about computers, what we can make them do. And he came up with a test which determines a machine's ability to exhibit intelligent behavior. And as we look a little further forward in the timeline, you'll actually see the point where we had systems that were actually able to pass this test. So this was his paper, revolutionary, kind of started artificial intelligence as a field of inquiry. And in 1955 is when, though, it was actually given the name by another mathematician, John McCarthy. So proof of concept of artificial intelligence occurred in 1956 when there was a program, The Logic Theorist, presented at a conference by 3 more very smart gentlemen, and we kind of go forward from there. So the 1950s was when the field was born, even though it had roots back in the 30s and 40s. The first chatbot was introduced in 1966, and that's actually what ChatGPT and its competitors are chatbots. So they've been around for quite some time. But in the 1970s, artificial intelligence kind of came to a halt. People were still doing some research, but we had what was called the first AI winter, starting in about 1974. And progress stalled because computers basically couldn't keep up. There's something called Moore's Law, which talks about computing power and how circuits double every couple years. And in the 1970s, we didn't have the technology to make more powerful computers in order to be able to drive artificial intelligence. So because of that, there was a lack of research funds, and we also didn't have databases large enough to be able to hold all of the data needed for artificial intelligence, and you'll see why in a little bit. So that went on for about 7 or 8 years, and then in the 1980s, it was reinvigorated with the introduction of expert systems, basically systems that were supposed to mimic experts in different fields. And we had a funding surge. Japan came into the game with their fifth generation computer project, but it wasn't until really the 1990s that we started to see how AI could impact our everyday lives. So in 1997, all of us are of the age that we probably remember this, IBM's Deep Blue computer actually defeated a chess champion. And Dragon Systems introduced Naturally Speaking 1.0, which was voice recognition software. So things kind of launched from the 1990s. In the 2000s, we had Roomba introduced, which brought AI into our homes. Amazon started its cloud computing service. 2006, Apple launched the iPhone. So we had, mobile, the mobile world took off. 2009, Google built the first self-driving car to handle urban conditions. 2011 through 14, virtual assistants were introduced. Watson won Jeopardy in 2011. And in 2014, a chatbot actually passed the Turing test. And then 2022, here we are. ChatGPT was introduced to the market, and you know what has happened since then. They actually estimate that the global market for chatbots is worth right now in 2023, $6.92 billion. And that just is expected to grow exponentially over the next decade and longer. So there are three actual types of learning that go on in artificial intelligence. Artificial narrow intelligence, which is the lowest level, and that actually is where most of the work that we use every day is located. It's also known as weak artificial intelligence, and machines are designed to complete very specific actions. So Alexa, ChatGPT, self-driving cars, basically they're systems that are built for specific purposes, and they're unable to independently learn. So the next level up, artificial general intelligence, which is called strong AI, and these are machines that basically can learn and think like humans on their own. This is where we start getting into, the ethical considerations. Should we create computers that can do this? We don't really have any answers to that yet, but we're working a little bit in this area. But like I said, most of our work is actually in the lower, the bottom of the pyramid in the artificial narrow intelligence. And then at the very top, which is hypothetical, we, people have wrote some papers, talking about what this might look like, but we really are not near the technological capabilities of being able to do this yet, is artificial superintelligence, where actually they have capabilities greater than humans. So from that, there are 4 different types of AI systems. Reactive machines is the first, and it's limited artificial intelligence that reacts to stimuli based upon pre-programmed rules. They don't really have memory, they can't learn with new data. So basically what we use these for is simple classification and pattern recognition. So a spam filter. A spam filter has rules that are programmed into it. You can tell a spam filter, look for messages that are this and kick them out. Or, you can put a filter on your email that says, see this and put it here. So you're giving it very specific directions and telling it what to do with it. Deep Blue, that computer that played chess, it was actually a type of reactive machine. It knew that if this move was made, you'd made this move. And basically, because of computing power, they can react faster than humans can. So most of the artificial intelligence systems that we use in our homes, at work, are actually under the limited memory category. Limited memory artificial intelligence actually use their memory to improve over time. They can be trained. They can take in data and they can create what are called parameters from that data. So large language models, which is a type of deep learning, are considered limited memory artificial intelligence. And that's actually what drives your chatbots like ChatGPT or large language models. This is pretty much the current state of artificial intelligence. Where most companies are playing right now is in limited memory AI systems. So the next one is theory of the mind. And this is artificial intelligence that can recognize and remember emotions, react to social situations, basically emulating human brains. There is a tad bit of success in theory of the mind. There really is no fully functional theory of the mind system, but we are doing research in this area. You may have heard of two robots. One is called Kismet and the other is Sophia. Both of those are where in laboratories, they have developed rudimentary robots that can respond to emotion, look at someone, tell how they're feeling, all those sorts of things. So it's actually kind of interesting when you read about what these robots can do and how they're trying to improve them. But there has been no fully functional theory of the mind system that's come online at this point. So the ultimate goal for researchers in artificial intelligence is self-awareness. And this is where, as I was putting this presentation together, I was thinking about, all the different science fiction movies that I've watched over the years. Self-awareness, basically Skynet, if you're a Terminator fan. Basically, it's a system that's aware of its own existence and has the intellectual and emotional capabilities of a human. Basically, it doesn't need to borrow consciousness from a model. Everything else previously, basically, there is a model behind the scenes that the system is running on. When we have self-aware AI, it doesn't need a model because it basically is going to be a being. And so this is where there's ethical debate as to whether we should ever get to this point of artificial intelligence. So those are the types of learning in artificial intelligence and the 4 different types of AI systems. And you'll see how what we're talking about in terms of ChatGPT kind of fits into all of this as we move forward. So right now, you're probably wondering, where do we use AI in every day? And it's more prevalent than I think most of us realize. Because we all don't sit down and actually make a list. Well, I attempted to sit down and make a list. So photo editing software, on your phone where you say, I want to filter out background images in photos. That uses artificial intelligence. Biometrics. If you sign into your phone or another device with a fingerprint or a face print or something like that, that uses artificial intelligence. Search engines are being tied to AI. Recommender systems. We all have been on a website that says, oh, you purchased this or you looked at this. Why don't you look at this? Those use types of artificial intelligence. Grammar checks. Smart replies, smart filters, predictive text, knowing, in a sentence, when you've typed certain words, this is probably going to be your next word. Artificial intelligence. Chatbots, digital assistants, Siri, Alexa. My house is automated. I live with my mother. And she's in her late 70s and has trouble getting around. So I made our house smart. Any room, she can talk to me in another room. So we have a whole Alexa system throughout. She can ask it questions. Sometimes I hear her having conversations with it. When she's asking it questions, it's actually kind of cute. But digital assistants, and they're planning on making them smarter because they're planning on taking the ChatGPT system and actually merging that in with Alexa. So it will actually, instead of just recommending websites that you look at when you ask it a question, it will actually be able to give you pretty complex answers. And smart home devices. If you've purchased an appliance recently, most appliances now can hook into your network at home. Washing machines can be programmed to turn off and on and do this and do that. Our hot water heater, when I bought it, had an option of notifying me if temperature goes out of range or if it thought it had a water leak and those sorts of things. To me, some of that is just more things to break on an appliance. but smart home devices. You might have light bulbs that turn off and on, or plugs, all of those fun things. So we are using AI in so much of our lives that we really don't even realize it anymore. Banking, at the doctor's office, you name it. AI is everywhere. So, education. Where is AI being used in education? Now, we don't necessarily at our institution have systems to do some of these things, but these are all things you can do with AI. So adaptive learning, understanding where a particular student is and then feeding that student information either as remediation or kind of as an advanced, moving them forward more quickly than some of their other students because they are grasping concepts. Adaptive learning. So assistive technology, when you have a student that actually has a book read to it or a PowerPoint read to them, that's all done with artificial intelligence. Data and learning analytics systems, gamification, creating assessments, and I'm actually going to demonstrate that for you here in a minute, intelligent tutoring systems, generating learning materials, plagiarism detection, chatbots for enrollment and retention. There are systems out there that will monitor learning management systems and then send faculty members and student success centers and those sorts of things flags when they see that students aren't doing well in a particular area on a particular subject, so that you can provide assistance to that student. There are systems that will grade for you, and artificial intelligence can help in academic research. I actually found a tool as I was preparing this presentation that will go out, and it's designed to help people with literature reviews. It will go out, find articles based upon parameters that you put into it, and then for each of those articles, you can tell what you want it to look at. So there were options for, give me a summary, kind of like an abstract of the article. Tell me what the methodology was, what were the outcomes, what kind of sample did they use. It was very interesting to actually see what this system could do. Now, it worked off of primarily publicly available articles. It couldn't go behind paywalls to do this kind of research, but it would give us or our students a place to start if they were conducting academic research. So, ChatGPT, the thing that we all woke up to one day and was like, what in the heck is this? So it was actually introduced in November 22, and it is a chatbot. It uses what's called a generative pre-trained transformer, which is a type of autoregressive large language model. So I know your brain has just melted on that. But basically, this particular category of artificial intelligence is where you feed these systems data, and from the data that it takes in, it creates what they call parameters in that data. So basically, conditions. So if it sees this, then this is going to happen. It makes connections. So right now, ChatGPT is working on GPT 3.5. That's the model of the generative pre-trained transformer that ChatGPT works off of. It has 175 billion parameters in the system. So these connections between the data, 175 billion. So a lot of this information about how these systems are trained, on how much data and what kinds of data are proprietary, obviously. So, you'll get bits and pieces here and there in different articles of, what it actually used to learn. So some people estimate that this GPT-5 was trained on 45 terabytes of text data, which is equivalent to 1 million feet of bookshelf space, or a quarter of the entire Library of Congress. And again, publicly available information. It didn't go behind paywalls to get this data. So after they gave it all of this information to learn, what they did was they did a period of called supervised training and reinforcement learning from human feedback. So if you go onto ChatGPT, which we will do in a minute, prompts that you put in, information that you put into the system actually go into its database. And then they ask you for feedback. Did it put, was the output what you expected? Those types of questions. So it actually learns every time it does an output. It actually helps it learn. And there are people that their jobs are, when they program these systems, to actually sit and put in prompts, see what the prompt comes back, and actually work back and forth with the system to make it smarter. So ChatGPT in and of itself is free. And you can input your prompt that you put into the system. You can put up to 3,000 words as instructions for it to work off of. Now, there is another part of ChatGPT called ChatGPT Plus. It was introduced in March of this year. Now, there's a charge for this part of ChatGPT. It's $20 a month. Now, it is built on a later version of a generative pre-trained transformer called GPT-4. Now, hush hush, nobody really knows, but it is estimated to have 1 trillion parameters. So, for example, they gave ChatGPT the CPA exam, and under 3.5, it failed. They turned around when GPT-4 was ready, even though they're always, like I said, always learning. They gave it the CPA exam using GPT-4, and it passed. So ChatGPT Plus is much smarter. It's more fluent. It's built upon more data. It has more connections than GPT-5. So that's why they're charging for that one. And the 3.5 version is free. For ChatGPT Plus, you can input up to 25,000 words of text as an input, and you can also give it images for it to work off of, which the original version does not have that capability. Now, one thing about both of these systems is they have what they call a knowledge cutoff. So the database that they gave them to learn from, it ended in about September of 2021. So if you're in it and you give it a question, like I gave it a question yesterday when I was playing with the system, and it was something that was very timely, it will come back and tell you, I don't have any knowledge of that, but based upon what I know, this is what I'm thinking. So it will make a prediction based upon, historical events, but it usually will tell you that it can't answer something after its cutoff date in September 21 if you ask it something about current events. So what I want to do is I actually want to show you ChatGPT in action if you've never seen it. So I am going to share this screen. So what are some of the things that we can do with ChatGPT as educators? So, and I had fun playing with this yesterday. Okay, so I'm going to ask it to write assessment questions. Now, you can narrow down, like I said, with the number of words you can actually put into these systems. You can be very specific as to the inputs that you put in. So it'll be more specific in the type of questions that it produces. I'm just going to ask it to generate some basic questions. So create multiple choice questions on the American Revolution. So we all tend to struggle sometimes, especially with, textbooks that the questions have been put out on Course Hero and those sorts of things. If you've drawn from quiz banks, you could actually use ChatGPT to help you create new questions that you could give your students instead of relying on test banks. Usually it stops at about 10. So there are questions, multiple choice questions. I'm going to have it create a lesson plan on evaporation for a 4th grader. Now, the thing with all of these is the systems are only as good as the data that have gone into them. So you will find in these that there can be mistakes. And when I look at the learning objectives, like I gave it a prompt yesterday that I asked it to create learning objectives. Some of the learning objectives were not measurable using Bloom's taxonomy. So the way I look at all of this is it's a place for us to start, especially if you're in a hurry and you need to come up with something. You can come in, ask it a question as a place to start, and then you can go in and modify it. So it's putting together, it's telling you how much time you think you should do, extension activities, materials you would need, but basically it created this for a 4th grade level. We could do the same thing and tell it to create, a college level lesson plan. So here we'll have it write. If I could spell. Something, write learning objectives for a marketing class. I just love watching it. The nerd in me is coming out. I asked it to create a worksheet. It came up with math problems. So there are all sorts of things that we can have it do. Now, what are our students using it for? They're having it possibly write essays for them. So this is, you're gonna laugh when I'm gonna put in here. So I asked it to write a 500 word essay on Elsa from Frozen. Now, you'll notice with ChatGPT, it does not cite its work. There are other chatbots that actually will cite where its information is coming from. So you'll see that's why one of my recommendations later is to actually dig into the sources that your students are using when you're having them do writing assignments. There it is, it's writing a essay. Now, I think we have a question. Wendy?
Yeah, hi. I've actually done a good bit of experimenting with ChatGPT. I'm an instructional designer at West Virginia Northern Community College, and you can tell it to generate something very much like this and include sources. You have to specify and include, cite 3 sources or something like that. So it can do that. You just have to specify.
That's
and then how accurate it is after that, still up to investigation.
Right. So that's, again, part of that prompt you would have to put into it is to tell it to do that. Whether our students would be smart enough to tell it to do that, who knows? But its default is it does not do that.
Right. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
This type of application just reminds me that it's so important to ask students to reflect on and use information in your course so that they can't use something like this to just generate a response, where they, need to reflect on the specifics talked about in class or something, that they read or whatever, but it feels so dangerous.
Right, yeah. And there are some strategies on how you can help them reflect, and I'll show you those in a minute. Now, here's another one. And there are a ton of alternatives to ChatGPT. I have a slide, and in the presentation that I put together, there are tons of links. So it will be available on our website later this afternoon. So I have links to actually 8 different chatbots that students might be using to write. I'm going to show you another one right now called Perplexity. The thing that I found unique about Perplexity is that you can actually tell it where you want it to pull information from. So this one, you can actually, instead of saying it's the internet and other focuses, the big database that it was trained on, you can actually tell it to only look in published academic papers. So if I ask it to write, 500 word essay on scaffolding and instructional design. You'll see that it comes in and it does automatically put its sources in. And if we clicked out on these, it will show you the articles that it actually pulled those sources from. So this one is a little different, and then you can narrow down the responses to different bodies of knowledge. So I thought I would show you that one as well. Something else our students might be using is a paraphrasing tool. So I actually have a document here that I am going to pull a paragraph from. So this is my original paragraph, and this is the paragraph that it rewrote it for me. So you can tell it what type of fluency you want it to have. you know, what type of language you want it to use in some of them. Do you want it to be formal? Do you want it to be more informal? Do you want to target it to a certain audience? But there are chatbots out there that will paraphrase things. So it's not only that our students can have things written for them by computers, but they can also take information and have the computer paraphrase, you know, paragraphs for them that they've pulled from an existing article or their textbook, you know, wherever it might be that they're getting the information from.
Marilee, a quick question
Sure.
is, if they do this, and I'm guessing, are the underlying passages the part that remained, like that would come up as a Turnitin match? Because almost twofold. So, because my question is, could they do that? Could you then pick up the rephrase and put it over into the original spot and have it rephrase it a second time, essentially, and don't repeat this to students, essentially as a way to
Like a paraphrase of a paraphrase of
to almost entirely defeat any Turnitin matches.
Possibly, but it's the way that these systems actually look for the information. It's not, they don't look for the AI portion of, say, Turnitin or GPT-0 that I'm going to show you here in a second. It's not out there looking for the match to see if these words are similar to these words. Basically, what they're looking for is, and I have it on my slide in a second, is it's looking for patterns in the data. So it's looking to see, based upon this word, was this word used? And it's algorithms that they write, that they look for these patterns between the words. So they're not necessarily taking the whole paragraph and comparing paragraph to paragraph, but they're comparing like the word, they're down at the word to word level looking for patterns. Does that make sense?
It does. And you know, that was kind of my suspicion, is that for this tool, plagiarism wasn't a component of those algorithms. But with this tool, you could essentially, again, if you picked up that new paraphrasing and dropped it in to the other side and had it rephrase a second time, essentially it possibly becomes a tool that at that point, if that was my, I copied the paragraph for a homework assignment and I had it rephrased and I picked it up and I moved it over and I had it rephrased a second time. And then I picked that up and put it in my assignment and uploaded it in Sakai. When it went through Turnitin at that point, it's possible that would defeat Turnitin.
But remember, you have two different scores. You have the plagiarism score,
Right.
which is looking at whether it's matching pretty much word for word from somewhere. It would still, from my understanding of the systems, pick it up as AI generated work though.
Okay. Good. All right. Perfect. That's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. So,
It looks like there's one more question.
sure.
I saw. Well, I do have a question, actually. I'm looking at this and it's saying, you know, not only could they, you know, rewrite a report. So for instance, I teach chemistry at West Virginia Northern, and a student could potentially write an entire lab report, including using Wolfram Alpha to do all the math. Don't some of, aren't they outfitting things like Turnitin and other plagiarism detectors to where they can detect AI, you know, whether a student is using AI?
Yes. Yes.
Good.
So there is, and now it depends upon what version of Turnitin your school has as to whether long-term you will have the AI detection.
Okay.
Right now, it's pretty much free for everyone that has a Turnitin license because they're still testing their systems to see. Now, we'll that's one of the tools that we'll talk about here in a second, you know, what their reliability rating is and those sorts of things. But long term, it depends upon what subscription you have as to where you have it. It's one of the reasons why we've actually changed our subscription at West Liberty. It's going to start this summer because we're moving to the package that the AI detection is going to be housed. So you can add it to other packages, but then that's an upcharge. So instead of our fee going even higher, I had to rework things with our contract. So,
Okay,
but yes, it does have that capability, and turn it in if that is what your school uses.
okay. Thank you.
Not a problem. So these are some of the tools that our students are using. And I mean, you can get them on your phone now. They, you know, you don't have to even be on a PC or a laptop to use it. There are, you know, systems that you can put on your phone that will generate this for you. So I'm going to go back to my presentation for a second here. So here are the different alternatives to ChatGPT. Here's a bunch of different paraphrasing tools. It's built into Grammarly. We all tell our students, go out and use Grammarly, you know, to help check your grammar, whatever. It has a paraphrasing tool in it now. There are image creation tools. These are a few, you know, if you're in the arts and you have, you know, students do, you know, paintings or photography, you know, these are AI tools that will create images for you. I don't have time. I played with it. I created a beach image with one of them. I'm telling it to create a beach image with 4 palm trees and a pink cabana. And it created an image for me. And then I had it do it as a photograph and then as a drawing. You can tell it what type of, if you want it to be impressionistic, you know, modern, you can tell it all types of art that you want it to put out. They're pretty interesting. They have ones that will create videos. They have ones that will create music. So this is out there for just about anything, you know, you can conceive. There is an AI tool that will generate content for you. So AI detection, that was a good question that we were able to segue into this. GPT-0 was introduced in January 2023 by Edward Tian. He actually was a student at Princeton University in their computer sciences program that programmed this over winter break, believe it or not. So it predicts whether a document was written by a large language model, providing predictions on a sentence, paragraph, and whole document level. So the 2 metrics that it uses to estimate probability that the text was written by AI are perplexity and burstiness. Now, perplexity measures the randomness of the word choice and construction of a given sentence. So computer generated writing is much more predictable than human writing. So that's how it's able to determine from a particular paragraph whether it thinks something is AI or human written. And then burstiness compares perplexity across sentences. So for an entire paragraph or document, it's comparing sentences to see, and then it comes up with a score. So basically, it's looking at what it thinks the most common next word is. And the more random the construction, the more likely it was written by a human. So that's how it determines. So that's why I said it would still probably pick it up, even if you started plagiarizing something, it would pick it up because it would still tell that it was AI because of this randomness pattern. I actually, in one of the tools, I gave it a journal article, and I said, write me a journal article like this, and it created me a whole scientific article based upon what it read in another journal article. And I could have flagged multiple journal articles for it to look at. So these things, systems really are amazing what they can do. Turn it in. gave their version, came out with their version in April 2023. There are others. CopyLeaks, Winston AI, and OpenAI. So OpenAI, and that's the company that puts out ChatGPT, they actually have their own version of an AI detector. So it's interesting, they kind of have both sides of the fence here. So I want to demonstrate for you real quickly what GPT-0 does. For those of you at West Liberty, we're more than likely later this summer, we're going to have Turnitin actually do a session on the new tool, and they will explain, you know, what to look at in, you know, the AI generator and the originality reports and those sorts of things, because it's going to change a little. But I also have a subscription to GPT-0, which is the one that the student put out. And from what I was able to find out, he did still graduate with his degree from Princeton. So if you wanted to check it something through Turnitin, and then, you know, if you say something came back 100%, you didn't believe it, I could run it through GPT-0 if you wanted me to. You can go out and there's a free version of it, but I have the educator version. So I am going to give it another document that I have here that I have seeded both AI writing in and something that I wrote. If you were to read the document, it wouldn't make sense because what I wrote is on actually a different topic, but it's not looking for that. It's just looking for the writing. So I am going to copy this. Put it in. So it's telling me that your text may include parts written by AI. So it sees the beginning here that it suspects, and it sees the end of what it suspects. Now, the one thing that I will tell you is these detectors don't do well on a couple of fronts. So this is the kind of report you're getting from GPT-0. And this is also the same kind of report that you will see Turnitin. What they'll do is they will give you an analysis. Turnitin actually gives you a score. GPT-0s, if you look down here, it gives you the perplexity score and the burstiness score. And the lower it is, the more AI generation, the higher it is, the more likely it's written by a human. Turnitin kind of combines it into one number that they give you, but then they will highlight the areas of the document that actually are generated by AI. So some general notes, both GPT-0 and Turnitin claim a 98% accuracy rate. Both of them are far more likely to not catch AI writing than falsely classify student work as AI. So in terms of the false positive side, they basically default to saying something is not AI versus saying to a student, yes, your work was written by AI and it's not. So if that provides any comfort to you, that's what I have found in most of them. Neither company at this point in time, because they're so new, recommends taking action against a student solely on the basis of their report. It's much harder for systems to detect text written by GPT-4 than previous versions because just of that number of parameters that it has. It's more crafty in how it's writing things. And is getting closer to mimicking humans in their writing. It's harder to detect AI writing in shorter works, but most of the systems do not come out and tell you what that minimum number of words is and for it to detect. So for example, a discussion board. You suspect that your student might be using AI for discussion boards. Because they're typically shorter works, those are going to have less reliability than they will on, say, a 10-page paper that you give a student. So I think you have to decide, pick and choose where you want to use the detection tools and where you don't at this point in time. So the rule of thumb, the more words, the more reliable and accurate in detection. So assessment in the age of artificial intelligence. And I'm getting close to running out of time here, so I have to be quick. Some of the things that I recommend that you think about when you're teaching in the age of artificial intelligence. So make a policy on AI usage for each of your courses. One of the things that I found interesting is there is some debate that if we don't disclose that we are now checking for AI, and that was one thing that, you know, it was kind of turned on in the middle of the term. Students didn't realize that we had AI tools, that we could be charged with deceptive assessment because we weren't disclosing it to our students. So most of what I'm reading is it's very important that you make a policy for AI usage for each of your courses. And I'm going to show you some samples in a second. You can create assignments that use AI writing as a starting point, let students brainstorm, come up with ideas, and then have them build upon what they're doing, you know, what the output of the artificial intelligence was. Focus on the process instead of the final product. Have students turn in drafts, halfway through, make them turn in, do a annotated bibliography, then make them turn in a rough draft and then their final paper. So then you'll be able to see that they actually were building it and just not handing you something that they pulled out of AI writing. Incorporate project-based learning scenarios. AI isn't very good about putting its work into context. So if you give them project-based learning scenarios, they'll have a little harder producing that kind of output. Use a flipped classroom model. If you teach face-to-face, have the students, watch your lecture online, put materials out there, and then actually do work in the classroom with them. Have them work on a writing assignment while they're there with you. You'll see them doing it. The more specific you are with your writing prompts, the better you are, because if you just put a writing prompt, like I did, give me something about Elsa, that just gives them, free reign to go in and these systems to come up with anything. But if you tell them you want it to say this and this and this and cover this and include this, and you can tie all of that to your grading rubrics with clear expectations, it makes harder for your students and AI to generate that output if you have very concrete and specific expectations. Spot check their sources, get to know your students' writing as much as possible. If I have, now granted, my courses, I don't have a large number of students in them like I know some of you do, but I can tell if I have certain papers in front of me, if I didn't have the name, I could tell you what students wrote them because you kind of get used to their writing style. So if all of a sudden they wrote differently, you could tell that there's something going on. Turnitin has what's called an ethical AI use checklist for students. It is common, has a copyright, I can't think of the term at the moment, I'm having a brain cramp, that you can go out and you can use it. And it's things for your students to think about when they're writing, and then after the fact, how they should be able to respond to you if you have questions about their work. Require course-based research that students have to include in their assignments. Assign content behind the paywall. If you remember what I told you, most of these systems are built on models where they learned on publicly available information. So if you assign them to use work, resources, articles that came from behind the paywall, then the system will have a harder time producing that content. Ask students to show and tell. Have them complete math problems in front of you, or if you want to make sure that they're creating a painting or a photograph, have them screencast themselves while they're working on it. So you'll actually see that they are doing things. Quiz students on their own work. What was your writing process? Write a reflection on what your writing process was. Tell me what you did. How did you find your sources? Have them turn that in with writing assignments so you can see how they built their assignment. And if possible, have students incorporate recent events. Again, that 2021 cutoff. So all of these systems have a harder time incorporating recent events. Now, they are working on that. There are some extensions to ChatGPT that they can actually go out and pull information from different websites that might have recent events on them. So, unfortunately, as these systems get smarter, we have to say smarter than them. But that is one strategy, especially in certain areas, is to have students incorporate recent events in their writing. So what I've done is I've put a couple different examples of policy statements on here. This one is from Colorado State University, which I happen to like. And they gave you 3 different examples. If you absolutely do not want to allow AI in your classroom, then here's an example of a statement. If you want to say, yes, you can use it, but these are the parameters around which you can use it, here's an example of one. And then the last one is, I know you're going to use it, just be smart about it. I like that the abdication statement. Personally, I kind of am falling into this middle category, just based upon the way the world is going. Students are going to encounter it in the work world. I think we have to teach them to be smart stewards of the technology. And the only way we're going to do that is by having them practice with it. Here are some other examples, some from Temple, Princeton, Northwestern. There's a bunch. If you go out and search on the internet, you can find a lot of samples of statements. And then you can, copy, paste, use it as a basis to craft your own from. So the future of artificial intelligence, where are we going? For me, and this is kind of like, my merely thoughts. Everybody might not agree with this, but I think AI is going to be regarded as one of the technologies that change history. If we look back, the internet, changed the way we live. Personal computers before that, as we look back through history, there are those things that we can say, society changed because of this. And I really believe that AI is one of those technologies. A recent estimate by Goldman Sachs said that 300 million full-time jobs worldwide could be automated by the current wave of artificial intelligence that is coming right now, with white-collar workers being more affected than manual laborers. Because, we're still going to need people to dig ditches and, deliver things and all of that. But it's the white collar work that, especially repetitive work, that can be automated with artificial intelligence the most easily. There are tons of ethical questions surrounding AI development that need to be addressed. In fact, recently there was a number of tech leaders that put out a letter that called for a 6-month moratorium on AI development to give both companies and regulators time to formulate safeguards to protect society from the potential risks of the technology. Do we want to develop sentient AI? That's a question that we're going to have to answer at some point. I believe that AI should be included in digital literacy programs, starting at a very young age, not only both on how to use the tool, but how to fact check and be a critical consumer of the information that comes out of these, because they have errors that we have to teach people how to spot ChatGPT actually just came out with, GPT-0 came out with a tool that you can put as a extension to your Chrome, that it will actually tell you if the website that you're reading has any artificial writing on it, which I think is pretty interesting, and I haven't had a chance to play with yet. So for me, I do not believe that AI is going to replace us, but I think where it's going to take us is to allow us to truly personalize learning, which I think will be of great benefit to our students. So I have all of the references here that I used in my presentation. My contact information is at the very end. If you have questions, want to reach out to me. Does anybody have any questions right now that they want to throw out? We're actually about 5 minutes into the next session.
Thank you.
You're
So
very
I have
welcome.
one question. Oh, sorry.
That's okay, go ahead.
Oh, okay. So right now is the Turnitin good enough to catch AI writing so far, or has to wait till next semester?
Turnitin. I think what the safest, it will catch it. I mean, we had a faculty member that used Turnitin, and it came up with an AI. It came up with a flag on AI writing. I ran it through another detector, and it flagged the exact same spots. So it will catch it. The question becomes, what do we do with it? For the spring semester, I kind of advised the faculty member, since it was something new, we hadn't told our students we were going to do it. I think you should kind of be judicious in how you handle the situation. Tell them, from your students, it was like 2 weeks before the end of the semester, that in their final papers, you will be checking for it, that sort of thing. I think it comes down to disclosure, like I mentioned. I would only use it on larger assignments, not the smaller assignments, not the discussion boards, only because of that limitation of, because it's based upon pattern recognition. So if you only give it a limited number of words, it's going to have a harder time determining patterns than if you give it a 5 or a 10-page paper. So for me, I'm only going to kind of pay attention to it in the larger assignments for right now until the technology advances a bit. And in those larger papers, you also have to watch too, that when there are transitions from AI to human writing, it has a hard time picking those up. So if I were to actually go back to that document where I showed you where it flagged AI writing, there's actually more of it in the document that it flags because it was in one of those transition sections. So can it do it for us? Yes. How we handle it at this point really is up to each individual faculty member, but we have to make our students known what our position is.
Got it. Thank you
have
very much.
Welcome.
I have a
Kimberly?
quick comment just to throw out there. This seems like something that the university should be modifying in our plagiarism code, rather than each individual faculty coming up with their own statement and putting that in each of their syllabi. As you noted, like Princeton or Colorado University or wherever.
But most of those are faculty samples. There are very few universities that have actually modified their academic integrity policy at this point.
That is shocking.
I know
Yeah, because the definition of plagiarism.
Yeah, Anne asked our legal counsel, and it was felt that it's covered under our academic integrity policy under plagiarism. So that's where we then have to interpret it for our students in our classes, how we view it.
It doesn't seem like a thing where there is an allowance for flexibility of interpretation, because if you are using somebody else's generated ideas, whether it's artificial intelligence or Joe Schmo, if they're not your original ideas, then it's plagiarism. So it just seems like one of those things where if it's covered under the plagiarism code, then it's not really something that faculty can then interpret
But if
differently.
you're incorporating, it depends upon how you're incorporating it into an assignment. If you're allowing students to generate ideas off of it and those sorts of things, to me, if you allow a student to use a certain percentage of AI writing, then I believe students should cite it just like they would cite someone else's idea. Now, if they don't cite it, then that's, to me, a plagiarism violation. But if they've cited it and it's a small portion of their paper, I mean, we're going to encounter it. That's one of the points of the Hollywood writer's strike, is the use of AI in writing in Hollywood. Journalists are using it. I mean, students are going to end up utilizing this technology in the workplace. So that's why I think we have to show them ethically how to use it and give them parameters for it.
Thank you.
People may disagree with me on that, but that's you know, so that's my caveat. That's Marilee's opinion only. So, are there any other questions?
I have a quick question, if it's
Sure.
okay. Have you seen any detector that can catch the image, digital image generated by AI? Not just so we can get some photography and stock photo, not that. I'm kind of dilemma right now in my class.
Yeah, I honestly don't know that I have seen one.
Okay.
That's something, if I run across one, I'll definitely let you know, but I have
Yeah.
not seen one at this point.
Okay, that'll be good. I don't think so yet, but I was wondering,
Yeah.
if you know anything about it. Thank you.
Anything else? Okay, well, you guys have my contact information, phone number, email. If you have any more questions, please feel free to reach out. Sorry, Corey, I kind of ate into your time here. They were, as I was talking about my presentation to my team yesterday, they're like, you're never going to do that in an hour, and I didn't. So I hope everyone enjoys the rest of the day, and I'm sure we'll be talking about this again in the future.